Thanks for coming on this Saturday, and I'm very happy to see so many people on a Saturday morning, which is a tribute to Rahul's film, which has, of course, been screened many times in Delhi. And the fact that there are so many people here, I think, is amazing. Um, Rahul, this is actually my fourth viewing of the film, maybe a little, three and a half viewing of the film, and each time I'm actually quite struck by the film for the reason that um, when we were in Bangalore 2 weeks ago, you actually said in one of the conversations that you described it as a very simple film. And I'm amazed at what you have done with this, what seems to be a very simple film, and the kind of complex layering of what you see as a simple film. And I actually see as an extremely complex crafting of something that starts with a tiny little event, and then how that event kind of proliferates, and how you kind of follow it layer upon layer and uncover layer upon layer through the making of the film, which ranging from, let's say, the creation of unionization in Maruti Suzuki, industrialization, mapping the productivity of labor, the apathy of the legal system in the country, land compensation, and there are so many layers. And then, of course, the environmental degradation, that whole sequence with Amina going up to Gujarat. And then, of course, this very, very thing that kind of runs through the film, this the interaction of the public, the political with the personal. So this constant kind of impact that this endless waiting, the tedium, the apathy of the courts has on the personal lives of the families of these workers. And I thought that maybe you might want to start with just, and it's a very broad question, I know, but you might want to we can probably break it down, but you might want to start with talking about just the challenges of scripting and structuring such a complex narrative that you have created with this film.
Thank you, Sabeena. You see, in many ways, this, as I've said earlier to you also, that this has been the most difficult film that I've ever made, and it was difficult for several reasons. One, of course, the fact that I started filming at a time when this movement was actually going down, and the other challenge was that here I was trying to make a film on a political event where nothing really was happening, and yet it was not. Yet it had, the only way it could work was if there was a certain integrity to the political event itself that I could create through the narratives, and so that was really very challenging. And also the other was that I wanted to make a film which I could screen at, and which I did screen at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and not have people actually get up in protest or to reject it. I wanted a film which was, which cut through in ways that there was a certain, a certain convincing narrative which was not just polemical, but actually which went across with arguments, with a certain level of non-rhetoric, and a certain actually way in which you could humanize and empathize with people who are in the film. And this I wanted, so in that sense it was a very difficult film to make, because really our hands were tied with because there was nothing there to make a film with. So it was a challenge to actually build each of these narrative pieces. And I don't know whether Reena, who edited, is here, and of course Sabha is also here, who worked on the script. So it was a challenge for all of us, and that was really the most difficult part of doing it.
So, I mean, I'm just drawing from what you just said. Is it just that during the process of the filming things kept unraveling, or you I mean, I'm sure as a filmmaker, you were actually looking, constantly pushing the borders. I mean, even the shift to Gujarat, for instance. I mean, I was just watching this thing, the amazing way in which the film ends. There are these two sudden turns in the film. One is that turn when we come, when we have that interview with Amina Sherwani and her husband, and then this sudden turn to Gujarat, which one is not expecting. It's almost like this picture perfect end to the story. Picture, and I say that in an ironic way because I mean, what it's not picture perfect, obviously, but it's almost for a filmmaker, it's this amazing climax. An amazing shift in the film at the end. So I'm just curious about how that actually happened.
See, as I kept working on the film, one thing which kept coming back to me was as to how there's almost a predictability to conflict. That there is no escaping it, given the way in which production is organized, the way in which industrial townships are organized, and the way in which labor is sought to be controlled. So there is, there is a certain there's a predictability to what's going to happen. And in Gujarat, and because I knew that there was a certain, issue going on around Gujarat, around the Maruti plant, and there'd been a lot of protests. But it was still sort of, I'd been reading about it, and when I actually went and started filming, it was just stunning to see that you could actually, in half a day, you could say exactly what is going to happen to this poor village, as to what is going to happen to people of that village, what's going to happen to the land of that village, what's going to happen to the children, to the animals, to the entire village, what is the future. You could almost predict it, which is actually scary, that you can, one thing, is that human beings, the amazing thing as to why we survive is that you, as human beings, is because we can always change the narrative. It's the human sort of quality, and here it is that people are being forced in a situation where there is just, you can predict that 10 years down the line this will be exactly the same scene as what you see of the villages in Manesar. So what I'm trying to say is that as I kept working on the film, one thing that kept coming back again and again is the certain circularity of events, of narratives, of situations, and of time itself. And so that was something that when then we started working with, Sava was, say, very insistent that 2011 was critical for the film, because without a certain way in which we could deal with 2011, it would not be strong enough, and which was the most difficult part of the film for us to edit as well as to script, because here was 2011. We had not, we were not filming. We had some material which was floating around, shot by other people, but to build an entire narrative thread with just that, and put it in a film where actually, you're also you have another style of filming and another style of narrative building was really was difficult to crack. But so we kept working on these various threads, and that's why it took a little while for us to get the structure right and to get the pacing right. But yes, a lot of stuff we worked out, because what I could film, what I could follow was the court case and the lives of people attached to that case and what was unfolding there. But the rest of it, of course, we would get something, some indication of a possible thread, and then we would sort of work on it and try and build it into a convincing narrative which could be included.
And it's been done in an amazing way, because as a filmmaker, I think one of the most difficult things to do is the fact that you had so little to begin with. And that's why I said at the beginning that it's amazing. It's an amazing film that starts with an event, and then it's almost like these circles and circles around it. Which brings me to the form of the film. This is a very, very different film, I think, in some ways, from your earlier films. I mean, I know your work really well, and I'm sure there are people in the audience who know your film very well. There are so many stylistic things that you have done in this film that I have not seen in some of your earlier films, and I just thought you might want to talk about that.
See, I'm coming back to this kind of filmmaking after a very long time, in the sense that I'd moved away from doing films on political events, and that was a conscious choice. And so to come back to making a film on overtly a political event was, of course, interesting personally because I was reminded of all the ghastly things we had done when we were younger, so one had to avoid those. So that was and also the thing was that I do believe that I'm not a purist. I've never sort of held purism as a great virtue. But and so to me, there is a certain, yes, there is. I think as a filmmaker and as an artist, I do have a certain way in which I relate to the world, and a certain way in which I instinctively, and I think instinct is very, very important because you need to follow your instinct to make certain things. So instinctively, yes, I'm interested. To put it very, very sort of simply, I'm interested in the everydayness of life. That to me is what really fascinates and interests me. And so to mix this interest and this instinct with a certain, larger, political event is is actually trying to put in two contradictory things, because what everyday actually does is that it's the to me actually it's the most radical way in which ideology gets challenged. It's the only way in which these sort of meta understandings actually start looking hollow, when you start looking at politics and at people's lives in an everyday situation. And to put these two things together meant, of course, that uh, that it would mean a different way of putting a film together. And I was, as I said, that I don't carry the burden of being a purist. So, and Reena, who's sitting outside, refusing to come in, is wonderful to work with because she is always ready to experiment and is always ready to, to do things in a new way. So I think that was what we didn't. I've not used a dissolve in 25 years of my filmmaking. I think last I did was must have been about 1989 or 90 or something. And after that, I never used a dissolve. And I've used dissolves, I've used effects, I've used all kinds of things in this film. So I think that it's important, therefore, to look at film as something which is constructed. It's not something which is some sort of way in which falls into our lap. And in that construction, how you construct it, of course, reflects a certain politics. And what you get with each kind of constructions is both a way, a kind of knowledge, as well as something which you don't, it's restrictive as well as opens you up to newer ways of discovering reality. So that's what I was really open to moving away. Also, it was boring. I felt that if I kept making the same kind of films over and over again, God, it would be so bloody boring.
Okay, I'll ask one more question, then I'll open it up, and that is that I want to comment on some of the most powerful visual sequences of the film. I'm sure everybody, you saw that Rahul does his own camera, and I'm always struck by that opening shot. This shot where these people just emerge from the mist and then they kind of disappear into the mist. Who are these people? The halogen lit shots of the factory at night, that amazing, almost non-real cityscape, or the factory assembly line, or whatever, all those cars. The images of the prisoners in the caged, trucks. And one of my most, I'm sure for everybody else too, but one of the most poignant sequences in the film, when Avtar Singh and his Avtar Singh and his daughter-in-law go to visit Sarabjit, and you literally see them holding on to the cage, and you get that feeling, and you've shot it in close-ups, and you get that feeling that they want to touch and yet they can't. You're so close and yet you're so far away, and you are a filmmaker who shoots all your films yourself. And I'm wondering, and it's probably one of the most difficult things to do. Would you ever be able to, and this is a question not related to your film, would you ever be able to do a documentary where you don't shoot your own film? And you might want to pick up an example from this film.
No, actually, I tried. Very early on in my career, I was nervous actually about this and about whether I can film and shoot and also make my own film. So I did try with another, but I just felt as if I needed to snatch the camera out of his hands. Not because he was bad, but just because I would get anxious as to what I wanted, and to have to convey this to someone else, and it was just too anxiety generating, and I just gave up very fast on that. And came back to doing my own camera. Although I
But
would
it must
love
be
to work with
incredibly
someone like
difficult.
Ranjan Palit. I just, I know that a really good cinematographer would, maybe give me much more than what I can get out of, because I know what the value of really excellent what excellent cinematography can do to a situation and images. So for instance, I really would love to work with, say, someone like Ranjan at some point of time. But also, it's very, as I said, that it just creates too much anxiety for me.
Questions from the audience?
It's a very intelligent movie. I really like some of the frames. I just wanted to ask you, how did you decide on the black and white frames with the grains and everything?
See, we wanted to, one, we were, working with this whole thing of time, and that, there's material which is from 2011, and then there is our material, and we felt that there was a certain separation that was needed between material that we were filming and producing, and which we were uh, getting out of the archive. And so it was essentially a way in which, to begin with, was to mark out the difference between the archive and what we were filming. That was one. Then what we felt was that actually, especially say if you look at the 2011 material that we've used, we felt that the way it comes in black and white at that point, it actually somewhere to me was becoming much more powerful than what it was as color. So there was a certain enhancement of the mood and the quality that black and white was bringing on the table for us, and that's why we used it.
Ask one more. And that is that, there's a strange kind of way. I was thinking when I was looking at the length of your, there's always this question about the length. There's a strange kind of way where we are very easily able to accept a fiction when it's long. But somehow we are so, resistant to documentaries being long. And I think yours is one of the long ones. I mean, there have been others which are long, but and I know that did you want it to be shorter? I mean, I also understand that this was a film made over a long period of time. There was this whole pressure to build up this, this endless waiting, and it's a very complex film to do. And yet, how do you build up that endless waiting and yet not, make the film drag? I mean, these are real issues, no?
Uh, See, the two sort of angles that I was looking at when this whole issue of length we were trying to deal with. One was that, of course, uh, as far as I thought that this film uh, had an audience, especially in working class areas and with trade unions. And so in that was the time when I would have preferred a shorter film, because I know that with a 2 hour film, actually I'm reducing the chances of screenings. So to me, actually, that this is the only time, also the only film where uh, length has been an issue, and time of the film. Otherwise, I've never really paid that much attention to that. But for this film, I was really struggling, and would have preferred a shorter film. But there was no way, at least from what we could work on in the edit as well as in terms of structuring. We couldn't come up with a structure which could be shorter, but this is actually peculiarly this is the only time I've really thought about time. But it just and this is the longest film I've made actually ever, strangely. So it was, but that's the way it went.
And yet, as Rashmi actually quite nicely pointed that out in Bangalore, Rashmi Soni, who did the conversation with Rahul in Bangalore, that it is a film about time also. No, it is so, time is so deeply part of this film, this whole business of waiting, time passing, things happening, nothing happening, and that's so much a theme of your film as well. So it's an interesting kind of a. So, Vashi, did you have a question? There's a question here from Usha.
Thank you very much, and I think it's a extremely important film for people to watch. Also, apart from its cinematic, visually it's very delightful also. But just it's something that people don't talk about labor. It's just not something that people discuss because it's not important. It's not cool. But could you just say a little bit about how you entered this? What made you enter it? If you wish to talk.
See, actually, the idea of the film, very strongly came to me on 18th of July 2012 when the incident happened at the factory. While I was watching in the evening the news, and there were all these discussions going on about what has happened, and there was shock, there was all kinds of stuff, and there was a certain kind of absence of certain voices, complete absence on all the television and in subsequent immediate reports. So to me, that that a film is here was there, and that also I would say that is there because I've forever had a sort of abiding interest in labor, and just that most of my work has been with unorganized, informal labor. I've never worked with organized labor, so there are all those combinations that were, of course, working, and then specifically, the film became possible because of this project that I was working on, which was on justice and conflict, and so I was actually toying with 2-3 ideas, and Sabha and Sanjay Kak, when they heard that I wanted to do this film on Maruti and that I was also thinking of some other film, they just put their foot down and said, no one works on labor, you have to do a film on labor. It's completely out. So it was kind of my own natural instincts plus pressure from people around that I did the film.
And yet, what is so striking is how articulate the protagonists of your film are. You don't. It breaks so many stereotypes about the voice of the worker because they are so aware. No. This is not a question. This is just a comment, but.
Yeah, no, that was one of my sort of I won't say discovery, but actually something which really moved me. If something that really moved me about while making this film was to see these bunch of young men who, as I keep saying, that they, what really I admire about them is, of course, their dedication, but also their intellectual rigor. Is their real understanding of not only politics and strategy, but also about production and about factories and about and the way they can talk and explain production. I've read so much as part of research for this film, but nothing measures up to their description of actually production. In this film there is that very small section of with Sunil where he's drawing the production flow of the plant. That's it. In the film it's 2.5 minutes, but actually it's a 2-hour masterclass. And if you just hear him explain that entire production process, he is completely mesmerizing, and he just is. So what I'm saying is that actually that to me was very, very sort of moving about the film. About working on this film was to really meet these guys and get to know them, and to, I am in complete awe of them actually.
Yeah, not a question, but also an observation. In fact, when you mentioned Sunil's thing, in fact, that's when I got completely latched onto the film. In fact, I had a very starting problem in trying to get into the film itself. That's from then on, it was like completely, very engrossing experience for me. In fact, I felt like I read a novel today, and I've stopped reading novels for a long time, and today that experience of going through a novel, reading the pleasures of that, and all that came through. I also felt that the film is about bail. It's so strongly hinged on the notion of bail that everything else becomes secondary. Like given the current context, also, somewhere like that seems to be the only victory points we kind of rally around, and yeah, it's very centered on that, and everybody waiting for that bail.
And yet it's a temporary reprieve.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know whether Ramani remembers it, but he was staying with us at some point of the film when I was, I think, shooting it still. And one day on the breakfast table, I was bemoaning and crying and weeping as to how, God, I'm going to end up making another, film which is just going to be very politically and ideologically so heavy that I'm going to hate it at the end of it. So in fact, in a way, that was really the struggle, really, to navigate in this film.
And you did a great job of navigating it, yeah.
Yeah, Rahul, you've said this already, but still, I want to kind of bring it back. What is very interesting is all the complexity and yet the simplicity. So the young man at the beginning who's making his food, he talks about how he becomes class conscious and how being part of the Maruti, how they already had a slightly privileged position. And in a way your film for me plays out like a symphony. It just goes from somewhere and it continues. But the continuous motive of these young men being walked by the police, into the court, and the drama of that, and the repetitiveness of that, and the continuous pain of that, the young men being just walked in by their hands, and the whole waste of that, so somewhere that symbolism of these bright young men just being led into the court, and the entire way, it's black comedy actually, your film at a level. And what I really enjoyed was the fact that, yes, like you said, IIM and wherever, this is a simple film, but it's a very complex film. It's a complex, simple film which can get, and the human emotions come out very, very strongly. And like Gary was also saying that, that very poignant moment in where the family's meeting in jail. It's so reminiscent of, Berlin Wall, people like us who've been part of the partition, etc. Families are left somewhere else. So your film evokes all of that, and yet it gets into very interesting different sides of law, what's happening, the collusion, the corruption. So yeah, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you.